In a remote resort in Mexico, crime lord Victor Kane brutally murders the project owner to seize his land. Jack Harlan, his top assassin, unexpectedly spares the life of the victim's son, a young boy named Ethan Reed. Amidst the chaos, this act unintentionally sows the seeds of a revenge that would unfold 10 years later. Darkness enveloped the coastal resort in Mexico, where shimmering neon lights reflected on the rippling water. The gentle sound of waves could not drown out the laughter from the lavish party inside the ancient villa. Victor Kane, a short man with eyes as cold as a razor, entered like a phantom. He wore a sleek black suit, holding a glass of blood-red wine. But the smile on his lips was not for celebration, it was the smile of a predator. "Gentlemen, tonight we will turn this place into my own paradise," he announced, his hoarse voice echoing through the speakers. The project owner, a middle-aged man named Marcus Reed, sat at the main table, his face flushed with wine. This resort, with its ancient Mexican culture blended into modern architecture, was on its way to becoming a top tourist destination. But Victor didn't come to invest, he came to plunder. For a long time, Victor had dominated the Chicago underworld, dealing drugs and manipulating real estate. Now, he wanted to expand into Mexico, turning this land into a casino and a money-laundering hub. "Mr. Reed, I propose a deal," Victor said, his voice deceptively sweet. "The left side will be a hotel, the right a casino. We'll be partners." Marcus Reed stood up, his eyes flashing with anger. "Who do you think you are? This project belongs to me and my partners. You think you can just barge in here like a fly?" The giggles from the guests quickly died down as Victor threw his wine in Marcus's face. "You fool," Victor snarled. "If you don't choose me, none of you will be sitting here enjoying the view anymore." Marcus lunged forward, but a gunshot rang out from Victor's hand. Marcus's head exploded, blood splattering across the banquet table. Screams echoed as guests scattered in terror. Victor's henchmen, burly men with rugged tattoos, moved in to control the situation. They cut down anyone who resisted, knives flashing under the lights, blood staining the marble floor. Jack Harlan, Victor's trusted right-hand man, stood in the corner of the room, observing everything with a cold demeanor. Jack was tall, his muscles rippling under his black shirt, his short hair neatly cut. He was a former Special Forces soldier, but a dark past had pushed him into the underworld. Or at least, that's what everyone thought. In truth, Jack was an undercover agent for a U.S. intelligence agency, having infiltrated Victor's gang for 3 years to gather evidence, clean this up. Victor ordered, turning to leave. Jack nodded, drawing a pistol from his belt. He plunged into the chaos, dodging a guard, swinging a knife, then delivered a hook punch that sent the man sprawling. Blood covered his hands. But Jack didn't flinch. He chased a group fleeing towards the beach, where the white sand shimmered under the moon. Suddenly, he heard sobbing from the bushes. A boy of about 10, with long, messy hair, was hugging his knees, trembling. It was Ethan Reed, Marcus's son. The boy looked at Jack with terrified eyes, tears streaming down his cheeks. Jack pointed his gun at the boy, his finger tightening on the trigger. But then he paused. That innocent face reminded him of his younger brother, who had died in a botched mission during his military days. "Run," Jack whispered, lowering his gun. Ethan was surprised, but quickly dashed into the darkness, disappearing among the dense bushes. Jack returned to the villa, pretending he had seen nothing. Victor was laughing heartily, signing a forged land transfer contract. Your village chief has fallen into the sea. He told his men, "Now, let's take a celebratory photo." But a strange noise from outside the door put Victor on alert. Jack volunteered to check. He opened the door and, surprisingly, Ethan was sneaking in, holding a rock, ready to attack. Jack quickly pulled the boy into a dark corner, covering his mouth. "Be quiet if you want to live," he whispered. Ethan struggled, but Jack held him tight, pretending to carry a stray cat he had found outside. Victor glanced over, smirking. "It's nothing. Just a stray cat." He turned away, satisfied that everything was settled. Jack released Ethan behind the bushes, pushing the boy towards the sea. "Don't come back. Survive and forget everything." Ethan looked at him one last time, his eyes filled with hatred, then vanished into the night. Jack returned to the villa, his heart heavy. He knew this act could blow his cover, but his conscience wouldn't let him kill a child. Victor clapped him on the shoulder. "Good job, Jack. You're the most trustworthy one I've got." But Jack only nodded, his eyes gazing out at the dark sea. Would the boy survive? And if he did, what would he become after this pain? 10 years passed in the blink of an eye. Victor Kane had become a notorious kingpin, his empire stretching from Mexico to Chicago, manipulating both drugs and politics. Jack Harlan remained his right-hand man, but his undercover mission was nearing its end. And Ethan Reed, the boy from that night, was now a mysterious fighter, nurturing his hatred, waiting for the day of his revenge. The ghost from the past was returning, and the war had only just begun. Which area are you listening to this story from? And what time is it where you are right now? Leave a comment below so I know you are still healthy and fully focused on this story. My dear friend, we will continue right after this. 10 years later, in Chicago, Jack had become Victor's right-hand man, but was in fact an undercover intelligence agent. Victor was now aiming for the mayorship to manipulate politics, and Jack was tasked with eliminating his rival. Amidst the dark conspiracies, Jack began to suspect a ghost from his past. The pale yellow streetlights cast down on the drizzling streets of Chicago, where skyscrapers glittered like sharp blades. Jack Harlan drove his sleek black SUV through the heavy traffic, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. 10 years since that fateful night in Mexico, he still clearly remembered the face of the boy, Ethan Reed, his hate-filled eyes lurking in the shadows. Is he still alive? Jack wondered, shaking his head to dismiss the thought. Now, he was the right-hand man of Victor Kane, the crime lord who had turned a drug empire from Mexico into a global network that reached Chicago. But Jack was no villain. He was an undercover FBI agent who had sacrificed everything to infiltrate this organization. Victor sat in his luxurious office on the top floor of a glass tower, smoking a Cuban cigar, his eyes looking out at the shimmering Lake Michigan. He had changed. His hair was silver white, but his brutality remained intact. From drug trafficking, he now wanted to manipulate politics. Mayor of Chicago. Victor muttered with a smirk. With that position, I'll control everything: the police, the courts, even the federal government. He called Jack in, his voice hoarse. Jack, you know what I want. The Secretary of the Interior is waiting. Give him the number. Jack entered, his black suit fitting his muscular frame perfectly, his eyes as sharp as a knife. $3 million. Sire. But there's a rival, William Croft. A clean candidate. Victor laughed loudly, slamming his hand on the desk. Take care of him. I know Croft has a weakness, a relationship with some floozy in the red light district. You and Leo Fu, my left-hand man, will handle this. Jack nodded, but his heart was racing. This was an opportunity to gather evidence, but also a huge risk. He left the office and drove to an underground bar on the south side, where the air was thick with the smell of smoke and cheap liquor. There, Jack met Liu Fu, a skinny Asian man with thick glasses who handled the books and conspiracies. Croft is at a hotel with his mistress, Liu Fu whispered, handing Jack a USB drive. Here's the video. Use it for blackmail. Jack nodded. But he knew Victor was testing his loyalty. That night, Jack drove to the red light district, where bright red neon lights illuminated the grimy streets. He parked outside, letting Liu Fu wait, and carried a black suitcase inside. The hotel room was dark, lit only by the dim glow of a bedside lamp. William Croft, the mayoral candidate, was raising a glass with his mistress. His face flushed. Jack burst in like a ghost. A silenced pistol aimed directly at him, a gift from Victor Kane, he said coldly, opening the suitcase to reveal the girl a living witness. Croft froze, his eyes wide. What do you want? Jack smirked. Withdraw from the election. Otherwise, this video will go to the press and the police. You raped her, then tried to get rid of her, Croft stammered. But his bodyguards burst in from the back door. Charles erupted. One bodyguard swung a knife. Jack dodged and delivered a hook punch to the man's jaw that sent him crashing down, teeth flying. The second one aimed a gun, but Jack was faster, firing a shot into his shoulder, blood splattering on the wall. He rolled to avoid bullets, grabbed the third man by the neck, and used him as a shield. Gunshots echoed. Glass shattered. Run, Jack yelled at the girl, pushing her out the door. Croft took advantage of the chaos and ran out into the street, his henchmen chasing Jack like hunting dogs. Out on the street, the rain fell heavily as Jack zigzagged through traffic. His pursuers were close behind, guns blazing. Liu Fu sped forward in their car, the door already open. Get in, he shouted. Jack jumped in, and the car sped off. But the others didn't give up. Two cars chased them, ramming into their rear. Jack rolled down the window and shot out the tire of one car, causing it to flip over on the wet road. The other car pulled up alongside, the driver pointing a gun. Jack ducked as a bullet whizzed past his ear. He leaped onto the enemy car, smashed the window, and pulled the driver out. The car lost control and crashed into a lamppost, bursting into flames. Liu Fu's car stopped in a safe area. It's done, Jack panted, his hands covered in blood. Victor called. Good work. Croft will withdraw. Now I need a new expert for the big jobs. Jack nodded, but he felt uneasy. He knew Victor was expanding, and his undercover mission was nearing its end. But the ghost from Mexico, Ethan Reed, would he return? Jack drove home, where Sophia, his girlfriend, was waiting. She hugged him, whispering, "You're so tired. When will this end?" Jack kissed her, not answering. He looked out the window, the rain still falling, and he felt like someone was watching him. The next morning, Jack went to an underground fight club on the outskirts of Chicago, where fighters gathered. He needed to recruit, and a young man with familiar eyes stepped forward. "My name is Ethan," he said, his fists clenched. Jack didn't recognize him, but fate had begun to turn its wheel. Jack went to an underground fight club to recruit an expert, choosing Ethan, now a mysterious fighter, as his assistant without recognizing his true identity. They carried out the mission to blackmail Victor's political rival, leading to a thrilling chase. Amidst the punches and conspiracies, Jack unwittingly pulled Ethan into the vortex of revenge from the past. Screams echoed from the underground fight club beneath Chicago, where the air was thick with the smell of sweat and blood. Jack Harlan descended the rusty iron staircase, the flickering fluorescent lights illuminating the muscular bodies grappling below. After last night's chase, he needed a new assistant, someone ruthless enough to handle Victor's underworld. This arena, hidden in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts, was where street fighters gathered, betting their lives for money. Jack stood in a dark corner. Observing each match, a giant shattered his opponent's jaw with a punch, blood splattering onto the ropes. "I need the best," Jack declared loudly. Stepping into the circle, the fighters stopped, their eyes watching him warily. He drew his gun and fired a shot into the ceiling, making it shake. "The most ruthless one will follow me. A chance to change your life." Immediately, chaos erupted. The fighters lunged at each other, fists flying, the sound of breaking bones cracking through the air. One man slammed his elbow into another's face, blood gushing like a fountain. Jack watched, his heart pounding not from fear, but because he knew Victor was pushing him, and his undercover mission could not fail. After half an hour of bloody combat, only 3 fighters remained, standing a muscular black man, a nimble Asian man, and a young man with sharp, cold eyes, Ethan Reed. Ethan, now 20 years old, had a solid physique from years of martial arts training. He didn't know that Jack was the one who had spared his life in Mexico years ago, but his hatred for Victor had turned him into a killing machine. Jack drew his gun and shot all 3, but they were wearing bulletproof vests and only collapsed in pain. "Now, prove your ruthlessness," he said. Ethan lunged first, grabbing the black man by the neck, spinning him to the ground, and punching him repeatedly in the face, blood mixing with sweat. The Asian man attacked from behind, but Ethan dodged and sent him flying into the corner with a powerful kick. Jack nodded in satisfaction. "You're chosen." Ethan wiped the blood from his hand, his eyes fixed on Jack. "My name is Ethan. I'm with you for the money. But don't test me." Jack clapped him on the shoulder, a fleeting sense of familiarity washing over him, but he dismissed it. They left the arena and drove back to downtown Chicago, where Victor was waiting for a report. On the way, Jack gave him his first assignment: blackmail William Croft, Victor's rival in the mayoral race. "Croft has a mistress in the red light district. We'll use a video to force him to withdraw." Ethan nodded, clenching his fists. He didn't know it, but this was his chance to get close to Victor. They parked outside a luxury hotel where Croft was celebrating with his wife. Jack went in first, with Ethan waiting outside as backup. The suite was dark, reeking of alcohol. Jack opened the door, pointing his gun. A gift from Victor Kane. He opened the suitcase, revealing the girl a living witness. Croft shot to his feet, his face pale. "You? What video?" Jack laughed coldly. "You raped her, then tried to get rid of her. Withdraw, or everything goes public." Croft screamed, and his bodyguards rushed in from the next room. A fight broke out. One man swung a knife. Jack dodged and landed a hook to his stomach, causing him to double over. The second man aimed a gun, but Jack spun around, using Croft as a shield, and fired back, hitting the man in the leg. Blood splattered on the white wall as screams echoed. Jack pushed the girl out the door. "Run!" He dashed into the hallway, bullets whizzing past him. Out on the rainy street, Ethan sped forward in the car, the door already open. "Get in," he shouted. Jack jumped in, and the car took off. Croft's pursuers were hot on their tail. 2 black SUVs. Ethan floored it, swerving sharply into a narrow alley. Streetlights flashing by. One car pulled alongside, a gunman firing from the window. Ethan dodged, the bullet shattering the rear window. "Keep driving," Jack yelled, rolling down his window and shooting out the enemy's tire, causing the car to flip and burst into flames. The other car stayed close, ramming their rear. Ethan slammed on the brakes, spun the car 180 degrees, and drove straight at them. The sound of screeching metal was deafening as glass shattered. The car came to a stop in the middle of a deserted street, smoke rising from it. Ethan jumped out, grabbed the surviving enemy driver, and repeatedly punched him in the face. "Who sent you?" the man mumbled, his mouth full of blood. Jack pulled Ethan back. "That's enough. We need to stay alive to finish this," Ethan panted, his eyes bloodshot in that moment. He remembered his father, remembered that night in Mexico. They returned and reported to Victor. "Good work." Victor smiled. "Croft will withdraw. You're Jack's assistant now." "Ethan." Jack looked at Ethan, a vague suspicion rising within him. Could this young man be the ghost from his past? But he didn't know that Ethan was secretly plotting his revenge, and Jack was unwittingly the key. Victor pulled Jack aside and said, "I've got a big shipment coming in from Russia. Get ready." Jack nodded, but he was tense. The undercover mission was drawing near, but with Ethan by his side, everything had become more complicated than ever. After a successful job, Jack and Ethan were temporarily detained by the police, but Jack was bailed out through his underground connections. Ethan revealed a piece of his past, making Jack suspicious. While Victor prepared to expand his drug empire, a secret from Mexico slowly came to light, pulling them both into a dangerous spiral. The rain was still pouring down on the streets of Chicago, the hazy neon lights reflecting on the drenched pavement. Jack Harlan sat in a cold police station interrogation room, his hands cuffed tightly to a steel table. Across from him was Officer Daniel Brooks, a young cop with eyes as sharp as a knife, tapping his pen on a case file. "You work for Victor Kane, don't you?" Brooks growled, throwing a folder of photos from last night's hotel onto the table. Blood, broken glass, and the silhouette of Jack rushing down a hallway. "Tell me, why were you and that kid there?" Jack remained silent, his gaze cold. He knew Daniel Brooks was the righteous but naive type of cop who didn't understand how the underworld operated. Outside the room, Ethan Reed sat in another corner, also in cuffs, but his eyes burned with hatred. Last night, after the chase, the police had swarmed the scene, arresting them both for public disturbance and suspicion of involvement in William Croft's blackmail. Ethan gritted his teeth, remembering that night in Mexico, his father shot dead. And now he was sitting here, next to the man who had unknowingly spared his life. The interrogation room door swung open, and a middle-aged man walked in. "Let them go," he said, his voice low but full of authority. It was Michael Stone, the head of the FBI's undercover unit, the man behind Jack's cover. Brooks glared at Jack, but reluctantly unlocked the cuffs. "You're lucky, Harlan, but I'll be watching you." Jack stood up, rubbing his wrists, and didn't reply. He knew Stone had used his connections to pull him out. But what about Ethan? He wasn't with the FBI. Jack glanced at Ethan through the one-way mirror. The young man had his head down, his fists clenched. Something about him made Jack uneasy. Leaving the station, Jack took Ethan to a small coffee shop in the Old Town district, where the smell of espresso mingled with the patter of rain. Sophia, Jack's girlfriend, stood behind the counter, her brown hair tied up high, her smile gentle but worried. "Are you okay?" she asked, pouring coffee for them both. Jack nodded, pulling Ethan into a seat. "You did well last night," Jack said, his voice calm. "But why did you risk your life like that? Croft's bodyguards are no joke." Ethan sipped his coffee, his eyes distant. I need the money, and I hate scum like them. Jack frowned. There was an icy edge to Ethan's voice, as if he were hiding a storm. Where are you from? Jack asked, trying to dig for information. Ethan hesitated, then answered, I grew up in Mexico, near a seaside resort. My father, he died there. Jack felt his heart clench. Mexico, a resort. He tried to keep his expression neutral, but the memory of a long-haired boy trembling in the moonlight flooded back. It couldn't be. Could Ethan be that boy? But he didn't dare ask more, afraid of breaking his cover. The phone rang. It was Victor Kane. Jack, get over here now. I've got a big job. Jack stood up, signaling for Ethan to come with him. They drove to an old warehouse on the outskirts of Chicago, where Victor was waiting with Fuller and his henchmen. The air was suffocating, thick with the smell of machine oil and cigarettes. Victor sat on a wooden chair, smoking a cigar, his eyes gleaming. Croft has backed off. Now I want to expand. The drug shipment from Russia is arriving soon. I need you and the kid to handle it. Jack nodded. But he knew this was the perfect opportunity to gather the final piece of evidence. This shipment could put Victor in prison. Victor turned to Ethan and smirked. You fight well. Kid, but I need to see you be more ruthless. Tonight, you'll go with Jack to the docks to pick up a small shipment as a test run. Ethan nodded, but a strange glint flashed in his eyes. This was his chance to get closer to Victor. Jack led Ethan to the car, his heart heavy. At the docks, under the silver moonlight, a container was being lifted from a cargo ship, but suddenly, a group of unknown thugs rushed out from the shadows, and gunfire erupted. Jack shoved Ethan down behind a wooden crate and returned fire. Bullets whizzed by, sending splinters flying everywhere. Ethan charged forward, launching a spinning kick to a thug's face, snatching his gun and taking down two others. He moved as fast as lightning, every punch and kick lethally precise. Jack was astonished. Ethan wasn't just a fighter. He was a fighting machine. They cleared out the thugs, but the container was broken open. The shipment gone. It's a setup, Jack yelled, pulling Ethan toward the car. Police sirens wailed in the distance. On the run. Jack looked at Ethan and asked harshly, Who are you? Really, Ethan was panting heavily, blood on his hands. I'm someone who wants to survive. What about you? How loyal are you to Victor? Jack didn't answer, his heart pounding. What did he know? Did Ethan suspect he was a mole? The car sped into the darkness, the police sirens fading. Jack knew that from now on, every step he took with Ethan was a dangerous game of chess. And the ghost from Mexico was becoming clearer. Victor assigns a mission to hijack a massive drug shipment from a smuggling queenpin in Russia. Jack and Ethan carry out a daring plan on a private plane, facing a fierce battle. In a life-or-death moment, their loyalties are tested, and a secret from the past begins to emerge. The private jet roared through the night sky, cutting through pitch-black clouds on its way from Chicago to Russia. Jack Harlan sat in the back, checking his Glock 19 pistol, his eyes glancing over at Ethan Reed, who was tightening his seatbelt. The air in the cabin was heavy, the smell of jet fuel mingling with tension. Victor Kane had given them an insane mission hijack, a $10 million drug shipment from the smuggling queenpin Natasha Volkov, a notorious figure in Russia known as the Ice Queen. Jack knew this wasn't just a test for Ethan, but also his chance to gather the final evidence to put Victor in prison. But Ethan, the young man with the cold, sharp eyes, made him uneasy. Was he really just in it for the money? Get ready, Jack said, his voice low but sharp. Natasha is no amateur. Her henchmen will kill us if we slip up. Ethan nodded. pulling a dagger from his boot, its steel blade glinting in the dim light. "I'm not afraid to die," he replied, his voice calm but hiding a rage. Jack looked at him, the memory of the boy in Mexico resurfacing again. But there was no time for doubt. The plane began its descent toward a private airfield on the outskirts of Moscow, where Natasha was waiting. The airfield was small and cold, surrounded by a snow-covered pine forest. Another, larger plane was parked not far away, its cabin lights glowing like a flying nightclub. Natasha Volkov, a tall, slender woman with platinum blonde hair, stood among her muscular bodyguards. Wearing an expensive fur coat, she smirked as she saw Jack and Ethan step out. "Victor Kane sent 2 kids to steal my shipment, how amusing," Natasha said in a thick Russian accent. Ethan tightened his grip on his dagger, but Jack signaled for him to stay calm. "We have $1 million as bait," Jack replied, pushing a suitcase of money forward. "We check the goods first." Natasha nodded, signaling her bodyguards to open the container. Bags of pure white powder were revealed under the lights. Jack checked it and nodded to Ethan. It was the real deal. But he knew the real plan: take the shipment, don't pay. Ethan suddenly drew his dagger, lunging at Natasha like a whirlwind. The blade flashed, but Natasha dodged, as fast as a panther. "Kill them!" she screamed. The bodyguards charged, guns and knives flashing. The fight exploded. Jack took down one man, the bullet piercing his shoulder and splattering blood on the white snow. Ethan spun, sinking his dagger into a thug's gut, then kicked the gun out of another's hand. He moved like a ghost, every stab lethally precise. Jack rolled away from a burst of gunfire, fired back, and dropped 2 more men. Blood stained the snow red. Screams, mixing with the howling wind. Ethan chased after Natasha, leaped onto the container, and held his knife to her throat. "The shipment, or you die," he roared. But Natasha wasn't one to be easily subdued. She pulled 2 sharp steel discs from her coat, attacking Ethan like a wild animal. The steel blade slashed through the air, cutting his arm, and blood dripped onto the snow. Ethan gritted his teeth, parrying with his dagger. The 2 of them fighting fiercely atop the container. Below, Jack dealt with the remaining bodyguards. One charged with a samurai sword. Jack dodged, grabbed the man by the throat, and slammed his head into the container. "Ethan, hurry up," he yelled. Seeing that he was being overpowered, Natasha launched a kick, sending Ethan tumbling. "You die today, kid," she laughed maniacally, raising a steel disc to finish him off. Suddenly, the airfield lights flickered. Jack charged in, punching Natasha hard in the face and knocking her down. He pulled Ethan to his feet, blood pouring from his arm. "Get the shipment." "Let's go," Jack yelled. They jumped into the truck carrying the container and slammed on the gas, speeding into the pine forest. Natasha's bodyguards gave chase, guns blazing, bullets riddling the truck. Ethan drove, his eyes bloodshot, his shirt soaked with blood. "Why did you save me?" he asked, his voice trembling. Jack didn't answer, focusing on firing back through the window. An enemy vehicle pulled up alongside them. Jack leaped over, smashed the window, and dragged the driver out. The enemy car flipped, bursting into flames in the darkness. They escaped, stopping at an abandoned warehouse. Ethan clutched his arm, panting heavily. "You're not one of Victor's men, are you?" he asked, his eyes boring into Jack's. Jack was silent, checking the container. The shipment was still there. He knew Ethan was suspicious, but he couldn't reveal his identity as an agent. "You want the truth. Don't ask stupid questions," he replied coldly. Ethan gave a bitter laugh, pulling out his dagger to wipe off the blood. "I'll find out. And Victor will pay." A chill ran down Jack's spine. What did he know about Mexico? Could Ethan be an even bigger threat than Victor? They returned to Chicago and delivered the shipment to Victor. He laughed smugly. "Well done. You're going to be my successor." Jack. But Jack knew that every step with Ethan was a step closer to the truth, and possibly death. Jack proposes to his girlfriend Sophia, revealing she's pregnant. Just as Victor names him as his successor, Ethan accidentally discovers a clue about the past, bringing his internal conflict to a boiling point. As Victor's scheme grows larger, Jack faces a choice between his mission and his family. The fiery red sunset stained the Chicago sky, casting a blood-red hue over the skyscrapers. Jack Harlan stood at the window of his small apartment in Lincoln Park, holding a sparkling silver ring. Inside, his girlfriend, Sophia Carter, was cooking, the smell of roasted beef filling the air. She wore a simple white shirt, her brown hair down. But her gentle smile made Jack feel this was the only place he belonged. After the dangerous job in Russia, he knew his time was running out. Being an undercover FBI agent meant living on the line between life and death. And Victor Kane was growing more suspicious by the day. "Jack, what are you looking at out there again?" Sophia asked, placing a plate of food on the table. Jack turned, smiling softly. He walked over and got down on one knee, surprising Sophia. "Sophia, I can't promise you the world, but I promise I will protect you and our child." He opened the ring box, his voice trembling slightly. "Will you marry me?" Sophia covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She nodded, throwing her arms around him. "I'm pregnant." "Jack," she whispered, handing him an ultrasound picture. Jack was stunned. His heart felt like it stopped. A child, something he never dared to dream of in his life, full of blood and deceit. But the brief moment of happiness was cut short by the ringing of his phone. It was Victor Kane. "Jack, get over here now. I've got a big job." Jack gave Sophia a quick kiss, put on his jacket, and drove to Victor's lair at the Chicago docks. The old warehouse, reeking of machine oil and cigarettes, was now the command center of his drug empire. Victor sat on a chair, surrounded by Fuller and Ethan Reed. Ethan, with a fresh scar on his arm from the fight in Russia, stood silently, his eyes as sharp as a knife. Jack felt like he was being watched, as if Ethan was searching for something. "Well done, Jack," Victor said, blowing out a puff of cigar smoke. "The shipment from Russia was a turning point. I want you to run the drug business, while I become the mayor of Chicago. After the job with the Brazilian mafia, you'll be the new boss." Jack nodded, but his insides were churning. This was the big chance to end his mission, but it was also a deadly trap. He glanced at Ethan and noticed his fists were clenched at the mention of Victor's name. Something was wrong. Victor turned to Ethan. "Kid, you've proven yourself. Tonight, you and Jack will go to Phoenix docks to check a small shipment before the big job." Ethan nodded, but a flash of hatred glinted in his eyes. Jack pulled Ethan outside, under the silver moonlight. "Are you okay?" he asked. Ethan took out his wallet, accidentally dropping an old photograph. "A small boat at a Mexican dock. That was my father's," Ethan said, his voice low. "He died there 10 years ago. I will never forgive the man who killed him." A chill ran down Jack's spine. The Mexican dock, the boat. He remembered the long-haired boy with eyes full of pain. You're from that resort?" Jack asked, his voice trailing off. Ethan looked at him, Didn't answer. Just picked up the photo and walked away. Jack stood frozen. Ethan Reed was the boy he had spared all those years ago. But did he know who Jack was? And if he knew, would he be loyal or would he betray him? That night, at Phoenix Docks, a cold wind blew through the rusted containers. Jack and Ethan were inspecting the shipment when, suddenly, a group of assassins rushed out from the darkness. Bullets whizzed by as Jack rolled behind a container, returning fire and taking one down. Ethan moved like a ghost, his dagger flashing. As it pierced an assassin's throat, he kicked the gun out of another's hand, then repeatedly punched him in the face, sending blood flying. "Who sent you?" Ethan roared, grabbing the last man by the collar. The man chuckled weakly, his mouth full of blood. "Victor knows who you are." "Kid," Jack pulled Ethan back. "That's enough. We have to live to finish this." But Ethan pushed him away, his eyes bloodshot. "Victor will pay, and if you get in my way, you'll die too." They escaped before the police arrived. But Jack knew everything was spiraling out of control. Ethan wasn't just a fighter, he was a ticking time bomb, carrying a vendetta from Mexico. Back at the apartment, Jack held Sophia, trying to push away the fear. "I'll end this soon," he whispered. But in the darkness, he felt Ethan watching, and the secret between them was about to explode. Would he be an ally or an enemy? And did Victor really know the truth about them both? Jack, an undercover agent, prepares to trap Victor during a major deal with the Brazilian mafia on a mobile bus in Chicago. Ethan turns on him, putting Jack in a perilous situation, on the brink of life and death. Loyalty is tested, and a secret from Mexico explodes. A cold wind blew through the Chicago port, where rusted containers were stacked under the hazy moonlight. Jack Harlan stood in the shadows, checking the tracking device hidden in a special lighter, a gift from FBI Director Michael Stone. He knew tonight's mission would decide everything, a massive drug deal with the Brazilian mafia on a mobile bus, where Victor Kane himself would appear as an undercover agent. Jack had waited for this moment to gather the final evidence to put Victor in prison. But Ethan Reed, the young man with hateful eyes, made him nervous. Was Ethan really the boy from Mexico? And how much did he know? Jack drove to the meeting point, with Ethan sitting beside him, silent as a ghost. He wore a black jacket, the dagger hidden in his boot glinting whenever a streetlight passed. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Jack asked in a low voice. Ethan smirked. "Victor must pay. I don't care who you are, but if you get in my way, you'll regret it." Jack gripped the steering wheel, his heart pounding. Ethan knew something, but he had no time to ask. The black bus appeared at the end of the street, its dim headlights like the eyes of a predator. Victor stood on the bus, flanked by Fuller and his Brazilian henchmen, big guys with cobra tattoos on their necks. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and sweat. "Jack, check the goods," Victor ordered. Pointing to a crate on the floor, Jack opened the lid, revealing sparkling bags of pure white powder. He nodded, but his fingers secretly activated the tracking device. The FBI was waiting for the signal to move in. Ethan stood behind, his eyes locked on Victor, as if he wanted to tear him apart right then and there. The deal began. The Brazilian boss, Carlos Mendes, inspected the goods and nodded in satisfaction. "Transfer the money," he said, his voice deep as thunder. But suddenly, Ethan drew his knife and lunged at Carlos. "You work with Victor? You deserve to die too," he roared. The blade flashed, slicing Carlos's arm, and blood splattered on the floor. Chows erupted. The Brazilian henchmen drew their guns. Jack rolled to avoid the bullets, taking one of them down. Gunshots echoed as the bus windows shattered. Victor yelled, Get that kid. Ethan moved like a whirlwind, stabbing one guy in the chest, then kicking a gun out of another's hand. Blood stained the bus floor as screams mixed with the screech of tires on the road. Jack grabbed Ethan, pulling him behind a seat. Calm down. You fool, he yelled. But Ethan shoved him away, his eyes bloodshot. Victor killed my father. What do you know about Mexico? Jack. The words cut into Jack's heart like a knife. He was stunned, but had no time to react. A Brazilian charged at him, swinging a knife. Jack dodged and threw a hook to the man's jaw, hearing the crack of breaking bone. The bus screeched to a halt at an abandoned pier. Victor jumped out, dragging Jack and Ethan with him. You betrayed me. Kid, he roared, pointing his gun at Ethan. But suddenly, Ethan spun around and pressed his knife to Jack's throat. It wasn't me. It was him, he yelled, pointing at Jack. He's the mole, Victor frowned. But a cunning smile spread across his face. Really, I had my suspicions. Jack, you were too perfect. Jack tried to stay calm, but his heart was hammering. How long had Ethan known the Brazilian henchmen surrounded them? Guns aimed at them both. Ethan whispered in Jack's ear. 10 years ago. You spared my life in Mexico. I remember your face. But if you protect Victor, I'll kill you both. Jack was stunned. Ethan was that boy. He was about to explain, but Victor gave a signal. Take them to the boat. Get rid of them both. The henchmen tied up Jack and Ethan and pushed them onto a small speedboat at the pier. On the speedboat, the waves crashed hard, sending up sprays of water. Jack tried to undo his ropes, but Ethan acted first. He cut his ropes with a knife hidden in his sleeve, lunged at the driver, and stabbed him through the neck. The man fell, his blood mixing with the seawater. Ethan turned to Jack, his knife still at his throat. Tell me, who are you? Jack panted. I'm with the FBI. I want to take Victor down, just like you. Ethan hesitated, but his eyes were still full of suspicion. Suddenly, police sirens wailed in the distance. The FBI had received the signal from Jack's lighter, but Victor, on another speedboat, fired a shot into their boat's fuel tank. Flames erupted, consuming everything. Jack pushed Ethan into the water just before the explosion tore through the night. In the freezing water, Jack grabbed Ethan's hand and pulled him to shore. They had escaped death. But Ethan looked at him, his voice cold. You owe me one. But Victor is mine. Jack knew that from now on, Ethan was not just an ally, he was also the greatest threat. After the boat fire caused by a treacherous superior, Jack sacrifices his face to save Ethan, leading to a strange face, transplant surgery. Ethan wakes up with a new appearance, determined to get revenge. Meanwhile, Victor tightens his grip around Sophia, pushing Ethan onto the line between justice and vengeance. Flames raged on the dark waters of the Chicago port, the explosion from the speedboat echoing like thunder. Jack Harlan and Ethan Reed emerged from the freezing water, coughing and sputtering, their blood mixing with the sea. The explosion, caused by Victor Kane and the traitorous FBI director Michael Stone, had nearly killed them both. Jack pulled Ethan to shore, sand sticking to their blood and sweat. He panted, looking at Ethan, who was clutching a wound on his arm, his eyes burning with hatred. You said you were FBI. Ethan snarled, his voice strained with pain. But why don't I believe you? Jack didn't answer, his eyes scanning the pier. Victor's men had vanished, but police sirens wailed in the distance. He knew Michael Stone had sold him out, conspiring with Victor to eliminate them both. We have to run, Jack said, pulling Ethan to his feet. but Ethan shoved him away, his dagger flashing in his hand. "I'm not going anywhere. Victor has to die." Before Jack could react, a piece of shrapnel from the boat flew and embedded itself in his face. Blood poured out as Jack collapsed, clutching his scorched face. Ethan was stunned, but the approaching sirens forced him to drag Jack into the shadows. They hid in an abandoned warehouse, the air thick with the smell of machine oil and rotting wood. Ethan tore his shirt to temporarily bandage Jack's wound, but his face was disfigured, the skin charred black and covered in blood. "Hang on," Ethan whispered, a hint of concern in his voice for the first time. Jack grabbed his hand and rasped, "Protect. Sophia." Ethan nodded, pulled Jack into a car, and drove to the nearest hospital. But when the doctor examined him, Jack's condition was too severe. "He needs a skin graft immediately," the doctor said. Ethan looked at Jack and suddenly made an insane decision. "Use my skin. I owe him my life." The surgery lasted for hours in the cold operating room under glaring white lights. Ethan woke up after 3 days, his face completely bandaged, stinging as if on fire. The doctor removed the bandages and handed him a mirror. Ethan was stunned. His face was now the face of Jack Harlan. "He didn't make it," the doctor said in a low voice. "We used your skin to graft onto his facial structure. He asked you to live on with this new identity." Ethan clenched his fists, tears falling on the face that was no longer his. Jack had sacrificed himself. But Ethan's hatred for Victor only grew more intense. Ethan left the hospital, carrying the dagger engraved with a boat symbol, a memento from his father in Mexico. He went to Sophia's cafe in Lincoln Park, where she was anxiously waiting for news about Jack. Seeing Ethan with Jack's face, Sophia was stunned and threw her arms around him. "Jack, you're okay," she cried. Ethan didn't correct her, just held her, his heart aching. "I'm here." He lied, knowing the truth would destroy her. Sophia showed him an ultrasound picture, her and Jack's child. Ethan clutched the picture, vowing to protect her, even if it cost him his life. But Victor Kane wouldn't leave them alone. He had become the mayor of Chicago, thanks to the betrayal of Michael Stone, who was now the chief of police. Victor knew Jack was the mole, and now he targeted Sophia to eliminate any loose ends. That night, Ethan received a message from Little Tiger, Sophia's younger brother, that Victor's men were hunting for her. Ethan rushed to Sophia's apartment, where 3 assassins were breaking down the door. He burst in like a storm, his dagger flashing as he stabbed the first man through the chest. Blood sprayed onto the wall as a scream echoed. The second man swung an iron pipe, but Ethan dodged and delivered a kick that broke his neck. The last one drew a gun, but Ethan was faster, throwing his knife to pin the man's hand before pummeling his face until the floor was stained red with blood. Sophia trembled in the corner, holding her pregnant belly. "Jack, what's happening?" she asked. Ethan pulled her out, whispering, "Go. Get to Little Tiger's place. I'll handle this." He got her into a car, but before she left, Sophia grabbed his hand. "Don't Jack." Ethan nodded, but his heart was heavy. He wasn't Jack, but now he carried his mission, and his own vengeance. Ethan returned to Phoenix Pier, where he lit an incense stick in front of his father's old boat. "Father, I will make Victor pay," he vowed, gripping the boat-engraved dagger. But Michael Stone emerged from the shadows, his gun pointed at him. "Are you Jack or the kid from Mexico?" he snarled. Ethan gave a cold laugh, his knife flashing. "You're about to find out." He charged forward, beginning a fight to the death that would pave the way for the final showdown with Victor. Ethan, with Jack's face, eliminates Victor's henchman, saves Sophia from an assassination attempt, and prepares for a final showdown at a high-rise hotel. An honest cop intervenes. But tragedy strikes. In a fit of rage, Ethan confronts the truth about his identity and his mission. The Chicago sky was pitch black, and cold winds howled through the skyscrapers, heralding a storm. Ethan Reed, wearing the face of Jack Harlan, stood in a dark alley near Sophia's cafe, his hand gripping the dagger carved with a boat, a memento from his father in Mexico. The night before, he had saved Sophia from Victor Kane's assassins. But the danger wasn't over. Victor, now the mayor of Chicago, had tightened his net, and Michael Stone, the corrupt police chief, was hunting him. Ethan knew that to end it all, he had to confront Victor at his final stronghold, the Grand Tower Hotel, his center of power. Ethan checked the Glock pistol hidden in his jacket, his eyes scanning the bustling street. Neon lights glittered, but they couldn't hide the smell of blood and gunpowder in the air. He got a message from Little Tiger, Sophia's brother, that Victor was hosting a celebratory party on the 40th floor of the Grand Tower. He knows you're alive. Little Tiger texted, "Be careful. Jack." Ethan pressed his lips together. The name Jack was now like a curse. But it was also the cover he needed to get close to Victor. He entered the hotel, blending in with the crowd in suits and evening gowns. The atmosphere was luxurious, the scent of expensive perfume mixing with the clinking of wine glasses. Ethan slipped past security, pretending to be a guest. But his eyes were locked on the elevator leading to the 40th floor. A large security guard blocked his path, his hand on his gun. "Invitation card," the man said. Ethan gave a faint smile and suddenly threw a hook to the jaw. Sending the guard sprawling, he dragged the man into a dark corner, took his keycard, and rushed into the elevator. The 40th floor opened to a magnificent hallway, illuminated by crystal chandeliers. But heavy footsteps echoed. 5 of Victor's assassins, weapons ready, were waiting for him. "You're Jack Harlan. Aren't you one of them?" snarled, his machete gleaming. Ethan didn't answer, charging forward like a whirlwind. He dodged the machete and plunged his dagger into the first man's chest, blood spraying the wall. The second swung an iron pipe, but Ethan spun and kicked, breaking the man's neck. The remaining 3 drew their guns, bullets whizzing by. Ethan rolled behind a pillar, fired back, and took down 2 of them in an instant. The last one charged with a knife, but Ethan blocked, twisted his neck, and a dry snap echoed. The hallway was now stained with blood, but Ethan didn't stop. He stormed up to the 41st floor, where Victor stood in the middle of the party room, a glass of red wine in his hand. "You're persistent, Jack," Victor sneered, but a flicker of suspicion showed in his eyes. "Or maybe you're not, Jack." Ethan drew his dagger, the steel glittering. "You killed my father in Mexico. Today, you d..." Victor laughed loudly and gave a signal. Another group of assassins rushed out, their swords and guns gleaming. The fight exploded. Ethan moved like a phantom, his dagger spinning as he severed one man's hand. Blood splattered on the glass as he kicked a gun from another's grasp, then shot down 3 men with his Glock. A man with a bowl cut, wielding a samurai sword, charged at him. Ethan threw his knife, pinning the man's shoulder, then leaped forward and repeatedly punched him in the face. "Who are you?" the man screamed, his mouth full of blood. Ethan didn't answer, simply finishing him with a slash across the throat. But Victor was not so easy to deal with. He drew a pistol and shot Ethan in the shoulder. Blood poured out, but Ethan gritted his teeth and charged. Victor dodged, punched Ethan in the face, and sent him crashing into a glass table. sending shards everywhere. You're just the kid from Mexico. Aren't you? Victor roared, pressing the gun to Ethan's head. I killed your father. And now, you're going to die too. Ethan laughed coldly, suddenly grabbing Victor's hand, twisting it, and stabbing him in the stomach with his knife. Victor screamed and fell, his blood pooling on the floor. Just then, police sirens blared. Daniel Brooks, an honest officer, burst in with a SWAT team. Stop, Brooks yelled, aiming his gun at Ethan. Are you Jack Harlan? Or the kid from Mexico? Ethan panted, his hands covered in blood. I'm not Jack, but Victor has to die. He was about to stab him again, but Brooks shot Ethan in the leg, making him collapse. Victor took the opportunity, rolled over, picked up a gun, and shot Ethan in the chest. He fell, blood soaking the floor, and the boat-engraved dagger dropped from his hand. Brooks rushed forward, restraining Victor, but his eyes were filled with pain. You've destroyed everything, Brooks whispered. Looking at the motionless Ethan, he had paid the price for his hatred. But justice was not yet complete. In a hospital a few blocks away, Sophia was waiting to give birth, unaware of the tragedy that had just unfolded. Would Victor be punished? Or would he escape justice as he had so many times before? And Ethan, was he truly dead? Sophia confronted Victor at the hospital, using the very boat-carved knife to end him in a surprising moment. The story concludes with the price of revenge and the lingering echo of vigilante justice. Ethan, wearing Jack's face, left a legacy for his unborn child. The beeping of medical machines echoed in the Chicago hospital room, the cold white light shining on Sophia Carter's pale face. She lay in bed, her belly round with child, her hand clutching an ultrasound picture, the image of her and Jack Harlan's baby. News of the chaos at the Grand Tower Hotel had spread throughout the city, but Sophia didn't know that Ethan Reed, wearing Jack's face, had fallen in the battle with Victor Kane. She could only wait, hope, and pray. In the hallway, the smell of antiseptic mixed with the sound of hurried footsteps. But no one suspected that a ghost was drawing near. Victor Kane, despite a wound in his abdomen, had escaped the police, thanks to Michael Stone, the treacherous chief. He staggered into the hospital, a blood-soaked bandage wrapped around his stomach, his eyes bloodshot like a predator's. He knew Sophia was the last weakness of Jack, or whoever was behind that face. Victor had heard that Ethan wasn't Jack, but that didn't matter. If you can't kill the wolf, you kill the whole pack, he muttered, his hand tightening on the pistol hidden in his coat. In her hospital room, Sophia heard the click of the door. She looked up, her heart pounding as she saw Victor enter, a malicious smirk on his face. Sweetheart, you think you're safe, he said, his voice as raspy as a razor. Sophia backed away, clutching her belly, her eyes flashing with fury. Jack will kill you, she growled, though fear gripped her heart. Victor laughed, raising his gun. Jack is dead. So is the kid from Mexico. Now it's your turn. But Sophia was not one to be easily subdued. She saw the dagger carved with a boat, a memento Ethan had left on the table, and memories of Jack flooded back. She remembered the nights he held her, promising to protect her and their child. You took everything from me, she whispered, her hand secretly reaching for the knife. Victor moved closer, oblivious. You and the baby will be a warning to anyone who dares to oppose me, he said, pressing the gun to her forehead. Just then, the door burst open. Tiger, Sophia's younger brother, rushed in, wielding a baseball bat. Let my sister go, he shouted, swinging the bat. Victor turned and fired a shot. Butia dulled it, the bat striking Victor's hand hard and making the gun fall. Sophia seized the opportunity, grabbed the knife, and lunged forward, plunging it straight into Victor's chest. Blood spurted out as he screamed and fell to the floor. "This is for Jack," she growled, stabbing him again. "And for Mexico." Victor's eyes widened, blood pooling on the floor, his vicious smile fading. He collapsed, dying in the hospital elevator, a place where he had once thought himself invincible. The police burst in, led by Daniel Brooks, the righteous officer. He looked at Sophia, the knife still in her hand, and Victor lying motionless. "Are you okay?" Brooks asked, his voice low. Sophia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "He deserved to die," she said, clutching her belly. Brooks checked Michael Stone's phone and found a file confirming Jack was an undercover FBI agent. He sighed, realizing Ethan had sacrificed himself to protect the justice Jack pursued. "He wasn't Jack," Brooks whispered, "but he fought like a hero." Sophia gave birth that night. Despite the danger, a baby boy was born, named Jack Ethan Carter, carrying the legacy of both Jack and Ethan. She held her son, looking out the hospital window where the dawn was breaking over Chicago. "You will grow up in peace," she whispered, but her heart was heavy. Ethan, with Jack's face, had paid with his life to protect her and expose Victor. Michael Stone was arrested shortly after, revealed as a traitor due to his debts and ambition. Justice had prevailed, but the cost was too high. The next day, at Phoenix Harbor, Tiger lit a stick of incense before the old boat, a memento from Ethan's father. "Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Ethan," he said, tears falling. The sea was silent, as if it had witnessed every tragedy and victory. At home, Sophia placed the boat-carved knife by her son's bed, as a reminder of those who had sacrificed themselves. She knew that even with Victor gone, the underworld would never stop producing men like him. But she also believed there would always be people like Jack and Ethan, ready to fight in the darkness. The story closes, but its echoes still resonate. Does justice truly exist in a world full of greed and betrayal, and how will Sophia's child grow up, carrying the legacy of two heroes? The darkness of Chicago remains, but the light of justice, however faint, has flickered to life.